Hello everyone and welcome to the last game we'll be showing from round 12 of this year's FIDE Candidates Tournament. It is Nijat Abasov versus Gukesh, and this is actually their third encounter so far. First time was last year in the Turkish Super League, where their game ended in a draw. Second time in the first half of the FIDE Candidates Tournament, where Gukesh defeated Nijat with the white pieces, and now Nijat will get a chance to do the same with white. So of course Nijat no longer has a chance to win the tournament, but he still wants to, do well, maybe even win a game. So far he hasn't done so. And Gukesh fighting for first place, actually. If he manages to win this one, he could again tie for the lead. So let's check it out. It's a really wonderful game. You guys will enjoy this one. We have pawn to d4, knight f6, pawn to c4, e6, and now knight to c3. We have bishop to b4. The Nimzo-Indian defense is on the board. Just give me a second. There we go. And here we have queen to c2. So there are a couple of ways you could handle the Nimzo-Indian. Most popular are queen to c2 and pawn to e3. Gukesh goes for queen to c2. And now look at this. This is, again, one of those positions like you have when you see the knight is on the board. You can play pretty much anything and it has a name and it's a very strong move. So same as here, like castles is very, very good. Pawn to c5, pawn to d5. Pawn to b6, pawn to d6 can be played. You can even play the early unprovoked bishop captures on c3. So all of these are fine moves, but here we have pawn to h6 by Gukesh. It is the 8th most popular continuation here, and it hasn't been played in any serious game. Last time I found it was played in a Grandmaster level game was in the European Cup of 2007. Sergei Movsesian played it against Milan Draško, and that game ended in a draw. So it's a really weird game since it was round 5. I can even show you the game. Like, it was round 5, and the Movsesian was some 100 and something rating points higher rated than Milan Draško, but the game continued a3, provoking the bishop, captures here, Movsesian castled, and after e3, c6 and queen to d3, the game ended in a draw. So I don't know why. It seems like a perfectly playable position and doesn't look like something where you would give your opponent a draw, where your opponent is more than 100 rating points lower rated. But yeah, it did happen. The reason I'm showing it is because no one ever thought that this would probably be shown anywhere, so I guess that makes it a little bit funny. So okay, h6, we have knight to f3, already a new move. So it is now, as of move 5, that we have a completely new game. Not something you hear every day when there's an Nimzo-Indian on the board. Pawn to c5, continuing, of course, challenging the white center. D captures on c5, and now knight to a6. Gukesh goes after the c5 pawn, and he wants to claim that e4 square for his knight as soon as possible, with the other knight controlling e4 as well. So very, very unorthodox approach to the Nimzo. We have pawn to g3, knight captures on c5, bishop to g2, and knight c to e4. Of course, white is controlling the e4 square twice, but really only once, as the knight is pinned. So that's why Nijat castles and Gukesh captures on c3. So knight captures, b captures, and bishop back to c5. And okay, Gukesh managed to double Nijat's pawns here, but you know from experience that these double pawns against the Nimzo are never really a big issue. We have pawn to e4, knight to h7 now, and pawn to e5, grabbing more space, preparing to shift this knight over to e4, maybe something like knight d2, knight to e4, and then control the d6 square. If this knight lands, could be very strong for Nijat. We have rook to b8, with some idea of maybe advancing the pawn to b5, but really just getting the rook off of this diagonal. We have knight to d2, and now pawn to b6. And we also have a nice photo of this matchup, so let's check that out. Only a couple of opening moves have been played, really just the Nimzo-Indian is on the board, and Gukesh played that weird h6 move. So yeah, I forgot to show it at the exact moment this was played, but yeah, there we have it. To enjoy that, Azerbaijan versus India. Let's continue enjoying our game. So okay, pawn to knight to e4 as planned. The knight now has some ideas of maybe coming to d6, but we don't see something like bishop to e7, but rather bishop to b7 by Gukesh. And here you really have to think, like, you can play knight to d6. Should you play it, or you do capture on c5? Do you win over the bishop pair? Well, not really. Here, pawn to h4 was played by Nijat, but We could discuss what happens if knight captures on c5. It is a reasonable move to make. And after b captures, you either trade the light square bishops or you play something like rook to b1 or any of the other moves, but it doesn't really do all that much. For example, bishop captures on g2, king captures, rook captures on b1, queen captures, and queen to c7. You know, not something you can push for with white. And if you go for this check, then the idea is of course just bishop captures, and after after pawn captures, you can pretty much play anything. Bishop captures, king captures, queen to c8. Now you pile up on those c pawns, and there's no way to advance them. It's just, well, in Gukesh's hands, I believe this would be winning for black. So after bishop to b7, just pawn to h4 by Nijat, keeping the tension, and now queen to c7. As you can see, Gukesh still has an hour and 57 minutes on the clock, so he blitzed out all of this, or bulleted it out, to use it as a verb. But yeah, queen to c7, the first real thing of the game for Gukesh, spent some 15 minutes on this, and now he says, all right, I'm interested in the e5 pawn, but not right away, as bishop to f4 would be pretty bad. So, think about the position. We have rook to d1. And of course, the pawn on d7 is very weak, so Nijat wants to keep it there, and then at some point in the game make a target out of it. And while you were probably expecting some sort of a developing move with like maybe rook comes to c8 or you just castle here, Gukesh plays bishop captures on e4. Gives up the strong bishop for this potentially very strong knight, forcing the queen to capture, and after the queen captures, now just castles kingside. And okay, you might be thinking, what is Gukesh really doing here? This doesn't seem to be very poisonous. But yeah, okay, bishop to f4 by Nijat. For those of you who are wondering why not just bishop to f1 followed by bishop to d3 and we checkmate the black king, as I know you guys are only looking at how to checkmate the black king, the problem is, and it is a valid question, is that after bishop to f1 there's pawn to f5. And now you really don't want to open up the f file for black, because you just get destroyed. And once you move the queen, then even pawn to g5 is coming, and now it is black who is pushing for the win here. But it is a valid question, yes. So bishop to f4, just nicely developing, and rook f to d8. Again, trying to push that pawn somehow. We have rook to d2, preparing to double up on the d file, and now knight to f8 by Gukesh. And this is a very interesting attempt, and one that keeps the tension on the board, and Gukesh, as a stronger player, definitely wants to play as long as possible without breaking tension, as that will give Nijat the most opportunities to blunder the game, at any level. Now, if you wanted to really push, you could play g5 here. For example, captures, let's say bishop to e3, pawn to d6. Okay, you do open up the d file, but now bishop to d4, and you don't really have anything here with black. For example, captures, and c captures on d and the d captures on e5, making it impossible to capture back because the rook on d2 would hang. Yes, it seems like Gukesh could have won a pawn here, but d5 is very annoying. Even if pawn to f5, let's say queen e3 and king g7, again you have to deal with this soon to be passed d pawn. So yeah, you can win a pawn here, but Gukesh decides to keep the tension, and the knight on f8 is a spectacular piece. It stops any sort of checkmating attempts from white, as white still has a queen and the light square bishop. You could maybe play bishop to f1, bishop d3 at some point, but also just defends that d7 pawn. So you really don't care if white doubles up on the d file. You can just do whatever, play b5 and continue your own plans. So okay, pawn to h5, grabbing more space on the queen side. Now even stopping g6 at some point. We have pawn to b5, now opening up the position on the queen side. C captures on b5, rook captures, and now bishop to f1. Bishop comes to f1 with tempo, rook to b6, and now rook a to d1. But like we said, you don't really care. The knight here is doing a spectacular job of keeping the black king safe. So just rook d to b8, and now pawn to a4. This was a 16 or 15 to 16 minute thing by Nijat, and yeah, you have to really make sure that the pawn is okay there, that it's going to survive, because if it doesn't, you will just allow Gukesh to create a passed pawn on the a file. Okay, and now 28 minutes for Nijat, 50 minutes for Gukesh. and it's only move 24. 16 more moves need to be made in order for time control to be reached, and now it's time to go after the weaknesses. The a4 is a weakness, the c3 is a weakness, e5 a potential weakness, d7 for Gukesh also a weakness, but one that is defended by a knight, and unless this bishop can attack the d7 pawn, you're not getting it. So here rook to d3 defending, rook to a3 going after the other weakness. We have rook to f3, shifting the focus to the attack. The idea is that okay, the rook is on a dark square. If we can play bishop to c1, force the rook to move, and quickly slide that queen over to f4, we might have some attacking chances here. So Gukesh just says, nope, not happening. We're going to trade queens now, especially with your weak rook on f3. You can't really move the queen just anywhere. So okay, he does trade, queen captures, d captures, getting rid of the weakness on d7, and now rook d to f3, doubling up, sorry, not rook d to d3, rook d to f3, doubling up on the d file. Rook captures on a4. Gukesh now wins that pawn. There was no way for Nijat to defend it. Bishop to g2 goes after the c6 pawn, and now rook to a2 puts pressure on the f2 pawn with the rook and the bishop. So rook 1 to d2, and Gukesh very happily trades off a pair of rooks. He would very happily trade off the other pair of rooks as well, as it's much easier to convert a pawn advantage without the rooks on the board. So rook to c8 defends the c6 pawn. Bishop to e4, we have pawn to a5, now starts advancing the past a pawn, and bishop to c2, stopping the pawn from crossing a4, because if this pawn crosses the a4 square, a4, a3, and is defended by the bishop here, it's merely a matter of figuring out how to get it up all the way. So if you allow this, your position is lost. We have pawn to g5, attacking the bishop here. H captures en passant. We have knight captures attacking the bishop, and king to g2. We have king to g7 by Gukesh, and bishop to a4. Now making sure that rook to a8 doesn't happen, as the c6 pawn would hang. So knight to e7. Finally, the knight can move. There is no more danger. c4, stopping the knight from getting to d5, and now rook to b8, preparing rook to b4 to go after the bishop and the pawn. So rook to a2. This defends with a tactic, because if you go rook to b4 now, then bishop to d2 is annoying, because after rook captures, bishop captures on a5. And yes, you are up a pawn, but it's much better to have the outside passed pawn than the passed c pawn. So after rook a2, bishop to b4, stopping bishop to d2. We have king to f3, and now rook to d8, shifting the rook over to the open d file to get it into the game. And now it's move 40. Nijat has to be very, very careful about what he does here. Because, well, that rook is very dangerous. The rook can come to d4. If it comes to d4, you're not going to be able to defend the c4 pawn. And what Nijat should do is play king to e4. Not only does it prevent rook d4, but also rook to d3. And if something like bishop to c2 going after the f2 pawn, you can block with bishop to e3. And if captures, you just capture, and you still fight. However, he played bishop to e3. He stopped rook to d4 this way, but now Gukesh plays just rook to d3, and now it's very, very hard to continue playing this game. The engine says the only way to hold is to play king g4, king to h5, and put pressure on that h6 pawn. While black can defend it with knight to f5, that would also weaken the c6 pawn. So that is the only way to sort of keep fighting, although it's probably still lost. But after king to e2, there is no more turning back. Rook to c3 goes after the pawn. Pawn to c5, and now comes knight to d5. The pawn is saved, but now the knight comes into the game, and there is no more defending this position. What can you play here? If you go for something like bishop to d1, because there really is no move you can make here. Your position is completely blocked. But if you go for something like bishop to d1, there are even tricks of rook captures on e3 with check, and the king cannot take. The knight defends, so f captures has to be played, and now let's say knight to c3 will win the rook on a2, and it's game over. So here Nijat spots that, of course, and he plays rook to c2, but now there is another problem. It's one that we've already mentioned a couple of moves ago, but I don't know if you guys were listening. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Gukesh. There's only one way to do it. Have at it. I'll give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on realizing that we have to advance the pawn somehow. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook captures on c2. Yes, not a very ambitious move, but it is a necessary one to win this game. Bishop captures on c2 and now pawn to a4. Yes, the weird placement of the king on e2 was enough for you to crack this one, and I'm sure all of you have found this idea, because now if bishop captures, then knight to c3 check just wins the bishop. So you cannot touch the pawn, and that means the pawn is coming to a3, where it will become unstoppable. We have king to d3, now pawn to a3. The only way to defend a2 is to play bishop to b3 or bishop to b1. So bishop to b3 is played, but now king to g6. Now the king wants to come to f2 and put pressure on that f2 pawn. Something like bishop to e1 will eliminate the f2 pawn, then the g3 pawn, and then the h pawn will win the game. So while the a3 pawn is impressive, you really, of course, know that it's the h pawn that will win this game. So bishop to d4, controlling all of the squares here, king to g5, and f3 doesn't help you. Okay, this locks out the black king, but just bishop to e1, and you cannot defend king g4, pawn to g4, king f4, and the king will start eliminating those pawns. So king c3, bishop to e1, bishop to e1 going after the pawn, king to d3, and now king to g4. We have bishop to d1 with check, and now king to g5, bishop back to b3, and now king to f5, king to c4, now king to e4, and bishop to c2 check, just king to f3, and now you find safety in g2. So bishop to d1, trying to keep the black king out of the position, but now pawn to a2, pawn to f3 with check, king to f5, and now what do you play here? Well, if you go back with bishop to d3 and just win this pawn, and no problem, bishop captures on g3, and then the h pawn wins the game, as we've discussed. So here bishop to c2 check was played, king to g5, and the bishop to b3. We have bishop captures on g3, creating a pass pawn on the h file, and that's it. Bishop captures on h2, pawn to h5, and he was in this position on move 57 that Nijat Abasov resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. There's no move that you can make that would even make it interesting here. So it's merely a matter of h4, h3, h2, h1, and it's game over. There's nothing you can do here, so it's pointless to even try. Yeah, brilliant win by Gukesh with the black pieces in this, like I said, almost never played a variation of the Nimzo-Indian, but that's what you have to do nowadays. Everyone is so well prepared, everyone knows everything, so in order to win, you just have to play something that doesn't give you any sort of an advantage, but it allows you to play a game, hopefully forever, and that you're the stronger player, and that you'll just be able to outplay your opponent at some point. So yeah, sometimes that is necessary, especially if you're playing against someone who is lower rated. That's definitely the way to go. And by winning this, of course, you guys know, as you have seen my two previous videos about round 12, that Gukesh is tied with the leaders, Hikaru Nakamura and Yanni Pomnishi. Fabiano with 7, Pragnananda with 6, Vidit with 5, Alireza with 4.5, and Nijat Abasov with 3. It's still going to be very interesting. Next, in the penultimate round, we're going to see some incredible matchups, and also in the final round, we'll see some incredible matchups. Gukesh's opponents for the final 2 rounds. Let me just check real quickly. I don't want to trick you guys. Are Alireza Firuja and Hikaru Nakamura. So yeah, I mean, anything can still happen. We still have the Hikaru Nepo clash, so everything is still open, everything is still possible. If Gukesh plays really well in the final 2 rounds, he can become world champion, or rather just for the moment challenge the world champion and then beat him and then become world champion. We'll see what happens. Exciting stuff this candidates tournament. Nepo is not just leading it straight up like he was in the previous 2 installments, but now he's actually tied going into penultimate round. So yeah, exciting stuff. Hope you guys are enjoying it, as I'm really enjoying it. But yeah, brilliant big game by Gukesh with the black pieces. Just incredible stuff here. So yeah, I would like to thank Andrea Sorcinelli, Johan Bridger, Jerry Drever, Felipe Giorgio, and Glide Bane for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And here's another photo I wanted to show you guys, a photo of Vishwanathan Anand, who was commentating on the first half of the event, with all of the volunteers that are making this event possible. So let me just load that up. It's a very nice photo. there you have it. Yeah, let's just enjoy that for the rest of the video. There you have it. Very nice photo. You know, let's enjoy it for a few seconds and end the video this way. See you soon.